Good morning. My name is Karl Fischer. I'm automation lead from Obsidian Systems. Today we have a topic called Shift Happens. We're going to talk a bit about OpenShift. We're going to talk about just how to run your workloads or best practices for workloads in the cloud or in different environments. With me is Danie, and Danie is going to introduce himself. So how are you, Danie?
Hi, Karl. It's nice to see you.
Cool. So Danie, you work at Red Hat. So what do you do there?
Yeah, so I'm a cloud platform specialist at Red Hat. So I look after the cloud platform technologies that we've got in our stack, but I also help customers to also adopt the new ways of working in terms of cloud infrastructure and how to actually move into the cloud.
Oh, that sounds awesome. That sounds awesome. So when organizations migrate to the cloud, what's some of the things that they need to think about? What do you think is the story there?
So I think one of the first things to note with that is when they move into the cloud, they have to make sure that they still keep some level of control and portability in terms of the workloads that they're deploying into these clouds. Because otherwise, all that they're doing is they're swapping their on-premise kit for a hosted platform that's being run somewhere else. So really about portability and also being able to change the way in which they run their systems when they move into the cloud becomes quite important too. Changes in terms of policies, procedures, and those types of things become quite important as well.
Yeah. Okay, that's so obviously the idea is to say, like, yeah, the idea is not to try and lock you into one specific platform, right? Because obviously being 2021, you don't want to be locked into a specific platform. You're modular, things move around, and it's probably a good idea to stay as flexible as possible.
Yeah,
yeah.
Sorry, Karl, just on that, I just wanted to say as well, we've always with on-premise workloads, we've always spoken about never to get locked in, right? All the customers that we speak to always say to us, you shouldn't get locked into a single vendor. That same principle counts in the cloud world as well. So you've got to make sure that you don't get locked into a specific platform as much as possible.
Yeah, and I think that plays another thing that leverages off is that when customers move to a specific cloud, they start consuming the services of that cloud. So they lock themselves into the co-deploy, or I don't want to insert vendor names, product here, right? Or their specific service for going through data that elastically scales to search things. And as soon as you lock yourself into those specific platforms, it becomes very hard to migrate that workload off that specific cloud to another cloud environment because you're not agnostic. You are locked into a specific service in there. So I think that is the new type of lock-in that customers might experience. So yeah, yes.
I was just going to say, and also customers forget that there's a lot of complexity within that as well. They underestimate the level of complexity that they do have adding on all of these extra services, these native services from these cloud providers, because they have to ultimately manage and run these things and integrate them into the platform as well. So there's a lot of work that goes into that as well.
Oh, yeah. So obviously when people migrate to the cloud, is a single cloud strategy better? Is a multi-cloud strategy better? What do you think happens when you shift a workload?
So we've always believed that it should be a hybrid model. So that hybrid model would be some services might still be on-premise or should typically be kept on-premise because of control and security and a few other things that goes into that. But then once you move into a cloud provider, the complexity that you get from running applications in a multi-cloud environment has to be balanced with the amount of risk and the amount of work that you are willing to take on to make that multi-cloud work. In a single cloud provider hybrid model that you're going to be working, let's say, for example, with one of the big hyperscalers, you simply have to worry about that one integration point that you're working on, making also sure that the data is available between that hybrid platform that you're building. You start building multi-clouds, now you have to worry about where the data resides. How do you get access to the data? What's the latencies, security contexts, and all of these other things that come into play as well. So multi-cloud is great because you're rebalancing your risk that you typically run and your workloads, but it does have some complexity that it adds to the environment as well. So you really have to balance those two things out.
Yeah, I think one of the big things that we always tell customers is that, yeah, sure, you can go into a specific cloud environment. It's a great idea. You can commit to your single cloud strategy. That's fine. But as soon as you start doing that cloud specific way of doing things, and you're not abstracting your workloads in a way where you lock in. So, for example, if you use something like AWS and you use CloudFormation to start doing your stuff, you're using that specific way of doing it for that specific cloud. So obviously there is some problems when you need to start looking at a multi-cloud strategy. I think there's some considerations that you need to take in place, but I think the benefits outweighs the negativities in a single thing, because obviously a single cloud never goes off, right? So that's never happened. So that's great. So okay, so the value proposition of OpenShift. Why do customers need to consider OpenShift? What makes it so great? Can you just give me a bit more information on that?
Sure. So I think it starts with what you were saying now about the abstraction within the cloud world, right? That's really what OpenShift does. It gives you this this abstraction layer that gives you the same tooling, the same platform, security, stability, and so on, irrespective of where you run this, either on-premise in a bare metal or in a virtual world, or on the public cloud worlds where you would spin it up in Azure or AWS, Google Cloud, IBM Cloud, whatever hyperscaler it is that you would like to then run, and any combination of that as well. And what we've also done is we've created a platform that doesn't just look at a container engine, but it goes further through the stack of applications that you would typically need for this as well. So really, we've built a platform that gives you out-the-box functionality that makes sense for enterprises to deploy and to run their applications. Nowadays, what we've also done is we've released managed services versions of these application stacks as well, which means that now you can go to the hyperscalers and you can get a managed service using OpenShift. So you bring your application and you become a lot more productive in a much shorter time as well. So that really becomes why we do it. We focused a lot on developers, and we focused a lot on the operations side of OpenShift. And we basically merge those two worlds into a single platform that makes sense to both the developer community and also to the operations communities as well. Karl, you're on mute.
Gosh, that's the yeah. Wow, that's the 2021 and 2020 magic. You're on mute. Thank you. Thank you. I wish I could not put my children on mute. Anyway, that's an inappropriate thing to say. Sorry. I'm sure there's some terms and conditions you agreed to before watching this webinar. I'm sure I'm covered for that. Anyway, so obviously the idea of having something like OpenShift is to say that here is a service that's abstracted in a layer on top of the cloud and hyperscalers, like you mentioned, and it's a unified way of you addressing compute in a generic way. It doesn't matter what the backend is. So, and I think one of the things that you mentioned was something to say that, and this could be in another conversation we had, is that obviously it's running on-prem as well, it's running in the cloud, but it's a unified way of you interacting with this amazing scalable piece of technology. Is that for the developers and the people that need to manage it, it's a single point of pane of glass where you can manage the services behind it, but at the back end, it obviously runs on anything that it can. So I think the thing is, another thing that people do ask when they start looking at something like taking the Kubernetes on that they need to support within their environment, is that the enterprise support that's around the products, right? So you have other people, and there's a lot of Kubernetes plays out there, and you can go to the CNCF landscape document. You can go look at the certified Kubernetes distributions. There's a lot to choose from. Last time I checked, I think there's over 50 or 100 or whatever. You go in and have a look at that. Why OpenShift from an enterprise point of view? Why the cadence and the release cadence? Why is this important for customers to consider something like OpenShift for their organizations?
Yeah, so that's a great question, right? So we get that question quite often from our customers as well. And really, I think there's, if you look at the enterprise support model that we've got, there's really three things that becomes important. Right? It's the security, it's the stability, and it's the reliability of the platform. You know that when you buy support for OpenShift from a company like Red Hat, that we've really done a lot of investment, a lot of development, a lot of testing to make sure that different combinations of different applications work, right? So we've made sure that the hardware and the software all integrates together. We've made sure that the platform is stable enough that we can bring out enterprise versions of different components on that platform as well. And it's not just us doing it, but it's also our larger ecosystem that works with us. So we're one part of a much larger ecosystem of software and hardware vendors that work together to develop this platform and the software and everything else that goes onto this system as well. And all of these other vendors certify their technologies on OpenShift because they know that we provide that common platform that works wherever they want to run it. So it really becomes that ecosystem that you're buying into. But we understand the enterprise side of this, the enterprise security that's really important, the management and automation of the platform that really becomes important as well, that customers typically need. Because what we found is many customers in their development efforts go and they deploy native Kubernetes services, either on-premise or they go and do it in the public cloud world. And they are able to develop applications in that way. But when they start getting to the real operational work on Kubernetes, the upgrades of the modules and those kinds of things, that's where the difficult part comes in. And we've made that much more simpler in the way that we do it from a Red Hat perspective and from an OpenShift perspective. We've been in the market on OpenShift now for more than 7 years. So we understand that market. We understand the product set that we've got inside it. And we've built a very well integrated, opinionated stack that we can provide to you. And you don't buy just Kubernetes from us, you buy a full platform.
Yeah, I think that's probably the core thing. Is like, yeah, it's always good to have engineers doing R&D and making sure they're researching the latest and greatest technologies and things like that. But somehow always there's the stacks that migrate. Somehow the test dev stack becomes the production stack. And then somehow, somewhere, some poor person needs to go and upgrade that. And I think that having something like an enterprise Kubernetes certified upgrade path, you would say, with OpenShift, is that to say that, yes, this is a preferred way of us doing upgrades and maintaining the stack in the enterprise. And it's just not, and obviously there's little things. The thing with Kubernetes, it's just not just Kubernetes, it's all the other bolt-on services with there. So when there's a security update to one of those little things, you can go and patch that thing, but how do you know that that specific component is going to work with the entire other stack again? And I think that's obviously the benefit of having something like an enterprise stack, is where obviously Red Hat's tried and tested this. This is a certified upgrade. This is certified patched. You can just bring that thing in, and you know that the stack will be maintained and working pretty well. So obviously, with what benefits are there of running workloads on OpenShift, right? Okay, can you expand on that? I'm thinking more along the lines of, like, obviously with the failover and the scheduling and. Yeah.
Sure. So I think, first of all, OpenShift is a Kubernetes platform, right? So in other words, you get the functionality and the flexibility that Kubernetes brings in terms of being able to schedule pods to start up and to run, to be able to run at the most optimal load balanced way, to have failover built into the platform and so on. So all of that built-in Kubernetes native capabilities we have. What we've also done is we've said that in terms of running workloads on the platform, we give you the opportunity to run both new cloud native stacks, in other words, the more greenfields kind of applications, the newer, more funky frameworks that you would typically be able to develop. But we also provide you with the brownfields kind of deployments as well. So you can essentially go and you can run all of your workloads on this one single platform with a single management API that you basically have to work with. So in terms of tooling your operations and your development teams, they simply need to understand one set of APIs that they work with. And they simply run these different workloads. And we support both virtual machines and containers on the same platform, which means that now all of a sudden you can bring your Windows VMs that you had running as isolated virtual machine infrastructure in your on-premise data centers, you can bring into this platform now as well. And you can then start modernizing those applications as you can to be able to change them into cloud native applications if that is something that you would like to do, or you can simply keep the choice and run it in that way as well. So that really becomes important as well. We've also bolted on what we call Advanced Cluster Manager, which is a much more advanced automated way in which you can manage multiple clusters of OpenShift, but also other Kubernetes flavors as well. So pretty much any one of the different certified Kubernetes distributions can be managed with what we call Rackham. And then we've also just added onto the platform advanced security as well from the StackRox acquisition that we did a few months ago. So with StackRox, we bring in Kubernetes native security onto the platform as well. So that means that you've got baked in security throughout the entire platform itself. And that just simply means that now all of a sudden you can really deploy DevSecOps in a much simpler way within your environment. You can shift your security left like everybody always wants to do, and you can move it all the way to the left from where you actually do your development and your coding and your everything else that you work with, all the way through the life cycle of that application. And again, in a container or a VM workload.
It sounds great. I was, while you were talking there, there's a lot of things that went through my mind, which is not something that happens quite often, but I'm joking. So the whole idea is that when you start introducing a technology like OpenShift into your organization, your devs and the, I wouldn't say your developers and your operators have a single workflow on how they can work and deploy applications and maintain workloads within the organization, right? And workloads is anything these days. It could be containers, it could be VMs, it could be whatever. But the amazing thing is that because it's a unified platform, you can manage everything in one place. So onboarding someone or teaching them a certain workflow or the cool thing is about having a unified interface like this is it reduces cognitive load. Right, so people have to learn a system to do this and do a system here and do something like this. With something like OpenShift is that they could just learn one tool and they are empowered to do everything in their organizations through this one specific way. And obviously it's an opinionated way, but obviously it's good to have an opinion in things like this because as soon as you have things that have a lot of complexity, you need to start enforcing opinions so that you can have predictability, and that's obviously something that's very important in an organization, is to have predictability in a safe way of upgrading your services. So OpenShift is available on multiple platforms. Can you expand on that? OpenShift, you said, is available as ROSA. There's one of the acronyms, and I've heard of Arrow. Can you expand on that a little bit more?
Sure. So let's move a little bit back to the on-premise deployments that you can typically do. So we've got bare metal deployments and we've got virtual machine deployments. There we support things like VMware, we support IBM Z, we support IBM Power, we support our hypervisor, of course, as well. But then if you move into the cloud world, we support native AWS, native Microsoft Azure, and also IBM Cloud and Google Cloud for the, if you look at those four major hyperscalers. ROSA and Arrow are very interesting deployments that we have, or services that we have, that we've jointly developed with AWS and with Azure, where it's a managed service that is provided by that service provider, so by AWS or by Azure. And also it's a native integration into their portal. So that means that you can go and deploy OpenShift as a native service on any one of those two clouds. Which means that it integrates into their billing and everything else that we work with. And jointly Red Hat and these vendors then support the platform. We have the same relationship also with IBM Cloud. So we have OpenShift managed in IBM Cloud as well. It used to be called ROCS, was the acronym that we use there. And then in Google Cloud, we have something called OpenShift Dedicated, where we also allow site reliability engineering from Red Hat to manage your cluster for you, and you can then run it there. So the whole idea there is that you can really go and you can scale into a multi-cloud world without having to worry about the complexity of managing your own platform. And it comes back to the cognitive load that you spoke about. Now the developers can simply bring their application and they don't have to worry about upgrades, patches, maintenance of the platform itself.
And obviously the cool thing is the endpoint changes, right? So in your kubectl, you just point it to another endpoint and then you have the same workflow. It doesn't matter on which cloud. And that's pretty neat. That's pretty neat. So is there any closing thoughts that you want to share on OpenShift and where do you think it's going? What are you looking forward to in the next 6 months to a year on features that you would like to see in OpenShift, or what you can say, like what's on the roadmap, or is there anything that you can add?
Sure. So I think really what's important, what we're seeing quite a lot of now in the roadmap is that integration of security and management into the platform. Right? So we are bringing in a lot more of that capability into the system. And really the idea is that we can start empowering a lot more teams within organizations to work on this platform. So that's really going to become quite important. There's a lot of other things that's in the, that's happening in terms of the storage space on OpenShift as well, with what we call open data foundations. Or OpenShift data foundations that we work with, or ODF. And with ODF, we also provide, container native, Kubernetes native storage on the platform as well, which really means that there's a lot of capabilities that you can bring into play there as well. So in different use cases now, like AI and ML, all of these kinds of workloads that's coming into play. Data science is really becoming an important part of OpenShift, and then also moving us to the edge. That's really the key as well. So taking that OpenShift footprint and all the goodness that we provide within it, condensing that down in the footprint, and then being able to bring it closer to users because of all the new capabilities that's coming in with 5G and these kinds of technologies. So edge absolutely is going to be key in the next 12 months.
I think one of the things that I always look forward to seeing is the integration of the ecosystem, right? So there's a lot of services that speak to one another, and there's lots of tooling works, and Red Hat's been really good at that, where they build the entire platform and their tools speak very nicely to that specific environment. And I think OpenShift is a real game changer for organizations when it comes to that. And there's a lot of managed services around it, and there's a lot of opportunities around that specific thing. And I really look forward to working with other organizations and seeing exactly how they're going to start using this. So So thank you for your time. Thank you for your time, Danie. I hope you have a great day further. I hope you stay warm. Keep safe, and I'm glad we're having this meeting without face masks. But yeah, I hope we see one another face to face soon.
Awesome. Thanks, Karl. It was great to have you.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Bye.